Anyway, camera on,
Thanks very
everyone.
much. Cool. Hey, Belgium. I'm Cam, and thanks so much for having me here today. I wanted to start with a simple show of hands. How many people here today have used a design system in any capacity? They've designed one, made one. Oh, wow. That's a lot of people. OK, cool. This should be fun then, I guess, and interesting. Well, I'm similar. And honestly, throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to work on some of the biggest design systems in the business. Most of you may know my work here from Wise, where we shipped this amazing new design system, entirely rethought from the ground up, to be deliberately different, universally accessible, and work the world over. We launched in 160 countries in one big bang, bringing the entire system to everyone, everywhere, overnight. New tokens, new infrastructure, new everything. It was pretty fun, albeit a bit tiring. And before that, I was in the creation of this super fun system for Beats by Dre, seamlessly merging their content and commerce worlds, whilst pushing for a new brighter and lighter aesthetic for the brand. And now, I'm lucky enough to head up design for OS at Cash App, this amazing company where we're reinventing the world's relationship with money. We're embracing the weirdest and wildest sides of design, and we're just getting started. We recently launched phase 1 of a completely new design system called Arcade. Fresh type stack, illustrations, spacing strategy. Personally, very excited by this. But don't worry, this is not a job interview and my creds. It's a conversation. And one that I started 6 months ago at Config in San Francisco, and have continued all the way to Belgium here today. And its focus is just on this idea of reflection. Because one of the most important aspects of my job isn't just about celebrating all these amazing wins, it's also about asking, how can we do better? Where can we improve as a design systems industry? So, about 9 months ago now, I started annoyingly asking every single designer I bumped into a really, really simple question. Are design systems making your work better? Is your work faster, more cohesive, and of higher quality than ever before? I've had close to 400 responses to this question, from small startups to some of the biggest names in tech. And honestly, it appears that I struck a lot of chords. Slow, restrictive, wish they didn't exist. That one really hurt me. All of these did, actually. What about this respondent? I've yet to be in a review where the solution to a better design is the design system. Or one of our least popular customers. Dampen creativity, too rigid for innovation. And it's fun sharing these and seeing all your faces, right? Because I can see people either nodding along, being like, yep, that's me, or kind of squirming. Perhaps if you, like me, you work on a design systems team. Of course, it wasn't all bad. There was a lot of love for design systems and our impact across the business and the industry, but also some really insightful opportunities to improve upon. So that's my plan for the next 25 minutes. We're going to look at the 3 core promises of design systems: speed, cohesion, and quality. I'll share findings from my research and discuss where we're doing well and where I think we could be going to next. So the first promise, speed, right? This is pretty simple. So how are we doing here? Well, honestly, this is where I think we're doing some of our best work. Components, tokens, guidance. It's all speeding us up because it's bridging the gap between design and development. And honestly, just freeing us up from the busy work. How many carousel components can you design? I stole this idea from a friend, but I asked the designer on my team to recreate a screen at Cash without using the design system. I was allowed to use it, though. And the results, well, they were pretty fascinating. On the left there is me with our design system. And on the right, without it. We each had a timer, and we saw how long it would take us to actually make this. And the difference, it was kind of wild. It took me about 12 minutes end to end to create that. Quite fast, if I do say so myself. It took Brian close to 3 hours and a ton of versions to get to that. When you scale that up across an 150-person org, the time savings are in their thousands of hours. But there's one thing that really stood out to me in this exercise. While the screen I made wasn't wrong, I met the requirements of the brief, Brian's screen actually developed exciting new ways of designing it. It might have taken 2 hours longer, but we've got a cool new profile switcher. We've developed some highly used actions up there. We've reorganized the UX of the list, and we've put more emphasis on your network. It's honestly just better designed than my one. And it really got me thinking, is speed always a good thing? If the cost of speed is a better customer experience, is that a price that we're willing to pay? Gustav said it perfectly when he said this. Design systems have changed the way we design, from what is the best solution to what can we make with what we have. And he's right. This led me to a really simple realization. Great ideas never start with a design system. They start with a sketch, a wireframe, creative freedom. So if we want our products to be great, we need to give designers more permission to explore. Allow teams to make their way to the best possible answer without restrictions. Because great design work takes time. It's not supposed to be quick. It took us roughly 700 hours to perfect the typography for the Wise rebrand. Reimagining, rethinking, then systemizing. At first, we tried to fit our new typeface into the old system. It was terrible. It failed. A classic example of square peg, round hole. So instead, we stepped back and just focused on designing the ideal solution, put implementation to one side, testing styles, layering, hierarchy, and honestly, just focused on designing something we're proud of. No purpose beyond that. We focused on finding the answer before the MVP. It was exactly the same with our colors, working through hundreds and hundreds of versions before we got to the right answer. Simple on the surface, but deep exploration behind it. I guess what I'm trying to show here is good work is rarely a flash of brilliance. It's just a lot of sweat. And design systems should never set a culture that stops creative freedom or discourages exploration. Instead, we should empower designers to create the ideal experience and then help them translate into the rules of the system. Let me show you a world I'd love to get to. This lovely screen here was designed by someone at Cash App. They focused on just creating the ideal experience without worrying about complying with the exact rules of the system. There's mistakes in here, but the idea is right. Then, when they're ready, they can run a linter to translate their creation into the rules of the system, automating any of the required changes with a tap of a button. It's more natural, it's an intuitive workflow that doesn't discourage ideation. We use this concept of translation to supercharge the Wise rebrand. Our resident tooling pro, Guso, built amazing plugins to translate old screens into new ones. We maintain the underlying UX, then translate into the rules of the new system at scale. All automated. To me, this shows that design systems don't need to limit the creative process. We can be amplifiers and enablers of it. And speed shouldn't come at the cost of great design ideas. We need to give designers more permission to create and then help them translate into the rules of the system. Our promise number 2 of design systems was all about cohesion, right? And while super obvious, if you don't have a design system, things are naturally going to drift apart. For example, when we started auditing the Wise type stack, we found 17 different fonts on one screen. Yeah, 17. Some were almost identical. We found so many colors, we'd gone full 50 Shades of Grey, and even managed to make ourselves 4 different brand blues over the years. Why? At Cash, it was similar. We had 6 different list styles and more icons than we knew how to manage. And any systems nerds in the audience, like, come on. My point here isn't to give designers a hard time. It's completely natural. But aggregate these seemingly small changes at our scale, and it adds up. Because inconsistency undermines trust. And you would not trust that one in the middle, would you? So why should our digital products be any different? Design systems are doing amazing at fixing this. They can translate uncohesive, inconsistent screens like this into rich, unified screens like this. Nothing here changed in the underlying UX. This was simply bringing a team onto the system. Or screens that lack that visual punch into delightful experiences like this. All in one simple flip of a switch, our apps are more cohesive, easier to use, and trustworthy. But like a lot of good deeds in life, this strive for consistency doesn't show the full picture. If you zoom out across popular apps in fintech, food, travel, fitness, shopping, communication, crypto, and many, many more, they're almost identical. And design systems are eerily, eerily similar. It's clear to me as an industry, we're stuck in this sea of sameness. And design systems have been accelerating this trajectory at an alarming rate. Our strive for consistency is coming at the cost of commodification. Every app now looks and feels the same. And some people will be like, that's a great thing. But it terrifies me. Because how something makes you feel and what it says about you matters a lot in digital product design. Every one of these apps offers an almost identical service, but the emotional reaction you get from seeing these logos up there is probably wildly different, right? So why should their design representation be identical? Well, it shouldn't. We cannot continue to conflate consistency as a complete lack of expression. It is possible to be consistent and expressive at the same time. If we want to step away from this commoditized landscape, we need to find ways to represent new ideas in our systems, expand the perception of design systems to express emotion, identity, storytelling. We need to be deliberately different, not to be disruptive, but because every product believes in a different way of doing things. Lash summed it up so perfectly. And today, we're just falling short. So how can we deliver on this change as a design systems industry? Well, let me show you a few examples from my work at Wise. This was the start of our headline font. We serve millions of customers around the world and wanted a way to represent that. So we set the goal to infuse international energy directly into the typeface. We studied signage, imagery, fonts, to find a way to make the type feel global. It took so much experimentation, testing, ideation to get both the right balance of function and feeling. You push to the edges in the pursuit of finding the right answer. Some like that T there, completely unreadable, reminding me of some of our A's we were all drawing earlier. But they have character and they express an idea. And it was worth it. The font breathes uniqueness and life into the system. It brings a subtle splash of international energy to honestly what might have been dull product screens otherwise. It was exactly the same with something we called tapestries. It started with a simple idea. Imagine these textures that feel inspired by the world. So we asked ourselves, what if we referenced our customers' movements in this asset? Photography, colors, iconography, their data, all from the world that they're roaming around. Hundreds of iterations later, we slowly move towards the tapestries, fusing this idea, the photography, the data, the color, into a single idea. And this is them. We called it a new semiotic for the world's money, inspired by the symbolism on banknotes, but updated for the digital age. They not only look beautiful, but they're this distinctive asset that brings life and energy to every part of our system. And our customers absolutely love them. From simple things like our illustrations that honestly might have just been expected without them, to creating unique propositions for our digital cards. They're unique, express an idea, and bring character into our design system. Every part of this design system is designed in that way, to stand out, for what makes wise wise, telling a story and expressing a global identity built around a single idea, the world's money. At Cash, we've been on a similar push. We found an exciting way to bring a customer's card directly into the experience. No more just dark mode or light mode. When a customer buys a hot pink card, they can switch their entire app theme to hot pink mode. Yeah, it's sick. It's different. Customers absolutely love it. And it's creating an emotional connection with them. Because what's different gets remembered. And what's remembered wins. So design systems should always strive for consistency, but never at the cost of commodification. We need to find new ways to represent new ideas in our systems, delivering on both the function and the feeling. Because today, most design systems, well, I think they're just too functional. I left the hardest promise of design systems till last, and I think we've all probably heard quality a lot. Quality. And I think, this is hard to define. Yet, it's probably the most used word, feedback in our design industry. Everyone must have experienced, just make it better quality, right? It's often contextualized as a list of principles, slightly altered from Didier Rams. Clear, valuable, intentional, simple, beautiful, systematic, innovative. Or perhaps adapted from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Stability, usability, performance, precision, style. Or maybe quality is one of my personal favorite definitions from my old boss, Josh. Exceeding expectations. An experience so good, it goes beyond what a customer thought was possible. And while our definitions of what makes quality design may vary in this room, I think the core question to answer is, what role do design systems play in that, in creating higher quality experiences? Well, it's undeniable that a set of shared foundations is incredibly valuable for any design team out there today, that feed into a scalable component library. But do those two things alone guarantee high-quality design? Hell no. Here is my second attempt at the profile screen I showed earlier, this time obnoxiously making the worst possible design I could, all whilst using our design system, 100% compliant. Those tiny links, a completely pointless drop-down, that wonderful open form field to change your name. And yes, this is very compliant. It's all part of the system. And it was a stupid exercise, right? But the point I was trying to make is design systems alone can't prevent bad design decisions. And more often than not, poor quality design is the result of a bad decision, not a bad system. That's because the building blocks alone aren't enough. The real challenge for quality is helping people make better decisions. I think some of the best inspiration for this, personally, lies in cooking. In particular, recipe books. They start with a clear vision or end state. Often, if you're like me, a tad unachievable. Then they provide you with a great set of ingredients which you need to go buy. They give you some clear instructions you need to follow, all while giving you enough wiggle room for creativity. They're successful because they focus on quality as an outcome of doing the right things. And they recognize that just giving you a list of ingredients wouldn't make you successful. So if our desired result is a high-quality product, what's missing from design systems today? Well, we're still in the early stages of figuring this out at Cash, but I have growing confidence that 3 pieces of the puzzle have the biggest impact on quality. Patterns, creating these predictable, reusable rules. Core surfaces, which are these scalable, reusable pieces of execution. And governance. And this whole package here comes together to form what we call at Cash our OS, or operating system. And while these ideas aren't entirely new, this side of the equation over here is often heavily underinvested in. And most design systems I experience are just glorified component libraries. Here's an example of end-to-end systems thinking we developed at Cash. This was our money tab before a recent redesign. It was good, but it was showing signs of breaking. Feature teams like Bitcoin or stocks wanted to evolve their little square, but it didn't really support their needs. A common way to look at this project would have been vertical, one-off in nature. Each team takes their little area they own and iterates it independently. And we've all been there. A product becomes a hot mess. But instead, we created a scalable piece of OS thinking. It started by systemizing the design intent into clear patterns, rational logic for why the page is constructed, installed applets, uninstalled applets. This allows the 30+ teams who work inside of this surface to understand and contribute within well-defined boundaries. That intent scales into a set of reusable primitives, which we call applets. Applets work like mini apps inside of Cash. They have states, launch into different parts of the experience, and they directly map to customers' jobs to be done. They give teams the flexibility and ownership they really desire, but all within a cohesive recipe. Then we create clear governance to make sure people are understanding and adhering to the rules of the system. The result? Well, it's a cohesive, scalable system that gives teams everything they need to make high-quality design. So, look, we're still searching for the silver bullet on quality, and we haven't figured it out entirely yet. But I do know that high-quality products are often the result of these 3 things: a clear vision, great ingredients, and great decisions. Decisions so that the sum of all these parts come together to make a cohesive, high-quality product faster. One where speed never comes at the cost of great ideas, where consistency comes without commodification, and finally, where we give teams the recipe for greatness, not just a set of ingredients. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all the amazing humans.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Would you like to join me for a short conversation? Right here.
Thank you. I like that as the background. It's cool.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, we have a lot of questions coming in.
Oh, shit, okay.
It's interesting for me because I remember when I read the very first blog post about the WISE redesign,
yes.
One of the things that was exciting to me is to see that, on the one hand, the big promise was bold.
Yeah.
It felt like, also the design system that's published online and all,
yeah.
like bold. But at the same time, the first, I think, 2 articles that came up were about accessibility.
Yeah.
Like big, bold, different, but accessible. And I really, really kind of loved that, because very often when we think about accessibility, we often think about, the boring stuff, the, just compliance and stuff like that. And one of the questions that came up here was from Elio.
Yeah.
What is your general approach around accessibility.
Yeah.
Specifically for Cash App. For example, Elio is writing, I saw quite low contrast with green and white text buttons and wondered how you approach it in general.
Yeah. I think it's probably most interesting to take the Wise example because there's like a story there, which is when we started figuring out the way we wanted to take this direction, we were all talking as a group, and we had this line, which I think resonated and brought all the way into the articles as well. We were like, we want this to be accessible but not boring. And that was just a feeling that we had as a group, that accessibility had traditionally been equated to stripping everything out, you know, making like an experience not as delightful perhaps as we had. So it was actually much more difficult than we expected, which is why it took us a really long time to figure out. So for example, we had to spend about 3 weeks going around in circles on link colors because our primary color is green, as someone pointed out, and it was just impossible to figure out how to do that. But I think as long as you're staying true to a goal which you're trying to achieve, and then you're willing to give designers and experts the time to actually work through it, you can do both. I think at the moment, the reason why I've seen it trend the way it is accessibility is often an afterthought. Like you have compliance issues, you get told to fix it as a designer, and then you're like, I've got 2 weeks, like what do we do? And the default and easiest answer is to be like, okay, well let's just, you know, ramp up the contrast ratio up here, go to monochrome buttons, things like that. And we're just trying to push beyond that, I guess, in everything.
Right. Makes sense.
So, yeah.
I think also it's very interesting to see just the attention to detail around the icons. There was,
Yeah.
I think there was an article maybe that came out around 3 weeks ago or so from Airbnb's new release, where they spent a ridiculous amount of time also looking at the little shadows and little texture differences. Like when you really zoom in, you just really see, oh, there is a little bit of a thin grain there.
Yeah.
And I think for maybe also for many people here in the audience, it feels like, well, very often it feels like we need to deliver. And
Yeah.
so there is never the time to really go in and really zoom in and try to get to the point where you really think about this really incredible experience that we want to deliver. How would you maybe still try to do something different that stands out, that is accessible, that really excels in usability in a relatively limited time frame? Like what would be your way of dealing with figuring it out?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking in my role, like 60% of my week is negotiating this conversation, which we probably all experience, which is basically priorities, like what we're working on and how we balance that, and the classic, like, you know, speed, quality, time thing. And I think my answer to it is actually, you can achieve high quality in anything you do. You just have to make a conscious decision to do less stuff. So like what we spend a lot of time about doing is like, okay, well maybe we can't make every aspect of this design system to the level of, you know, we tried to do with Wise, but we start with something like icons and we give it the appropriate amount of time that we think it needs. And typically what I've seen is when you're making good work and people are excited by that good work, it creates really powerful momentum with inside large organizations. And often it's quite difficult for people to be like, we're going to commit to this in giant overhaul. But if you do one thing really, really well, and then you pick that one thing with a high degree of intention in terms of, we really feel we can win in this, then I think you're actually off to a good races and you can build a case study and a business use case around that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think in many ways we try to often sell these big ideas.
Yeah.
But what happens is many businesses want to do more of the stuff that has worked in the past.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? So if you show that one thing, hopefully an impactful thing that actually made a difference, it changed something and improved some metrics or whatever, then all of a sudden there is more readiness, I guess, to do more of that, right? And so this is kind of how it starts rolling, maybe.
And just to follow up on that, like one of the things which I think is probably the most overlooked across design systems broadly is the role of color. I think if more teams made a conscious decision to go really deep on that and think about the different levers which they could pull, it can have impact on brand aesthetic and marketing side, it can have impact on accessibility, it can have impact on the overall feel and vibrancy of the product. And I think that's one of those small areas which is often good to start in.
Right. And also like the fact that you actually went all into, I don't remember the word that you were using, like all the photographs and all the textures and all the kind of feeling, like almost like, it almost feels like mood boards are not cool anymore. You just need to go in and you basically go and explore. But then this role of aesthetics, it didn't go away, and we can do a lot with that. Tim is wondering, I work with 3 fintech products and the jumpy CEO, who wants something different, but then only refers to the same similar-looking products and expects results in a month. In your experience, what would be a realistic time frame to establish a design system for a fintech brand?
I think it all, I don't know who asked that, but I think it all depends on your scale. So for context, the way the WISE case study was set up is essentially we did a proof of concept. We had a really short period of time with a very small group of us. I think it was total 4 weeks to basically find out if this had merit and then represent it back to a small group, and then they would say like, no, this is a waste of time. And then we got to that, and everyone was like, oh, this feels like something we should continue to invest in. And then from that proof of concept to actually making it reality, it took about 8 months. But the scale of ours is massive. There's like, I think there was like 70 product teams in total working across this. So you can think about the amount of orchestration. And then what we did is we've had a list of all of the foundations, which you can kind of access on the WISE website. And we would just do sprints on each one. And then every time that we made an update later down the line, we'd basically just update it. And one of the things that worked really well is we did a lot of the work in public. Well, public is the wrong word. It was public beta, so it was we have an internal app that just our employees can access. So we made the decision to flip the rebrand on quite early. And it actually really helped because we got tons of feedback from employees. We found flows we hadn't audited and noticed. So I think that would be my one bit of advice is like, start with a proof of concept, generate excitement, and then with the actual execution, just try and build it in closed public is probably the polite word to use there.
Makes sense. Do you think that the role as a product designer will require more and more skills in that direction to create design systems that stand out?
Yeah, I think when I look at the role of AI and other tools more and think about this in the future, this is just my personal opinion, but I think what I see happening is systems will increasingly be able to take a lot of the expected day-to-day work of a product designer as it sees today. So we'll probably have larger systems teams, smaller embedded product design teams, because if we can just go design to code, I think it's going to require less people, basically. So what we think about and what I personally think about a role is like, how do we need to make those systems more differentiated? And actually, I think the one thing that we can compete really successfully on is creativity. Because for all of the AI tools we've all used, you do them and it just looks like everything out there. So if you're a designer making stuff that feels like everything else out there, you're probably more likely to have your job taken by a computer. But if you're able to really think deeply about how you make unique products that build deep emotional connections with people, I think you've got a level of job security which is, outlast all the computers. Knock on wood, actually, I should say.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think also it's, when I guess, it's not even a question, but it's probably just a question, I guess, about your point of view. Because when I think about some brands, modern brands, digital companies that really stand out, and I mean, I don't mean to kind of be against anyone at this point, but I don't think necessarily about Uber being an example of like a company like that where design really stands out. But for some reason, even although some people disagree, Duolingo seems to be one of those brands that actually just has this emotional connection. Like you can just you react to it, you either hate it or you love it, and more people maybe love it, maybe some people just hate it. I had a similar reaction when I got the WISE brand. I think that it just really feels very different. And I mean, Airbnb in many ways also looks different, but then you also see a lot of basically other tools replicating it, I guess, right? I don't know, it was just a thought I had to express somehow.
Yeah, definitely. It's good.
It's just sometimes I just get lost. This is how it is.
No, but like, I guess you're not supposed, I think you're not supposed to please everyone, I guess. That's often a misconception.
Yeah, but I think like, I'm still not getting, like, how do you get there to that point where you stand out to really be felt or experienced differently? Is it just an enormous, meticulous attention to details and design work? Or is it just really fighting against decisions like, okay, we need to systemize, we need to make it more predictable, and we need to maybe take a shortcut here.
Yeah.
Is it like really being principle, like really having strong principles on that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it just applies to like all design work. If everyone here was to kind of look back over their career and just ask a simple question of like, what was the proudest work I made? I've personally experienced it's when you've had a really clear vision and understanding of what you wanted to achieve with something, and then you've been able to deliver that and make sure that what you do deliver exceeds customer expectations. Like it really tugs on the heartstrings. So I think a lot of people get lost in this kind of, they seek consensus rather than conviction, and that's where the road gets really muddy. So what I often tell my crew is like, if you love this thing and you're convicted that it's right, that will naturally filter into customers. So that's like what we're hunting for constantly is deep-rooted conviction of this is the problem we want to solve, and we fundamentally believe and have tested it with customers that this is going to tug on the heartstrings in the right way. So that's kind of the way we think about it.
Cool. So just 2 more questions.
Yeah,
preferably shorter questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I keep talking all the time.
We'll do a panel next time.
That's okay. Would you recommend to create 2 different systems between brand and product design system? And how do you maintain brand cohesiveness?
So short answer, no. I think we organized ourselves differently between brand and product at some point in the industry. They have different needs, but there should be overlap. So what we try and do is create a set of shared foundations, and the line which we use is share our similarities, optimize for our differences. So that's really the way we think about it.
Another one is, what's the fine line between following recipes and exercising designer autonomy? How do you decide what to do when?
That's a tough one. I think if I'm understanding the nuance in the question, as I was saying earlier, I think the most important thing is to make sure that you're actually designing the answer right first, and then you can figure out how to translate it into the rules of the system. And typically when you go through that process and a product designer's like, okay, I deeply believe this is the right way to solve this, I've done the testing, we only have 5 components in the design systems which can solve this need in the same intention, then what you usually see is the delta and like what's left over. And that's when we tend to either contribute a new component to our library, or if it's not gonna, if it's like a one-off, we just build it one-off. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but that's the way I try and think of it, is like never put design systems in too early to restrict creativity. And then once you have the answer, then you basically negotiate what is the appropriate level of translation.
Okay. And the final one from Jackie.
Yeah, great questions.
Yeah, fantastic questions. When you show the Cash application and Wise application, the question from Jackie is, how much of a project do you recycle for the new one when the product is in the same industry? How do you make it also feel different or look different when you already have seen before a solution that works well?
The short answer is none. The idea between Wise and Cash is completely different. Like Wise is all about international money, it's living abroad. Cash serves a really tight demographic inside of the US market, and it's predominantly young Gen Z, and that gives us an opportunity to really respond to those customers. They're digital natives, they love apps which are like wild and funky, so I think the permission we've got is different versus Cash and Wise. So the execution, wherever we end up over the next few years, will be wildly different. So yeah, nothing is my answer.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Well, thank you so much for being with us,
Thank
Cameron.
you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
thank you.